On the steps of Mao's birthplace, we have our photograph taken. 57 Australian and New Zealand university students who spent a month travelling in China after the Cultural Revolution.
I think China is a far more interesting country for Australia in particular, as far as trade and Australia's own economic development.
By the time I went with Whitlam, this was really the very beginning of the establishment of our relations, even though Whitlam was leader of the opposition. But that's where it all began.
At that time, the whole idea of so much collaboration was completely unimaginable. The earliest student exchanges were in 1974.
We were probably the only Westerners who actually lived with Chinese students. I mean, there was nobody else. And that was a totally unique experience.
I can remember showing pictures of Australia and my fellow students not believing them. But it's, through friendship that we came to understand what each of our countries was all about.
After we established diplomatic relations, Australian scientists were really extremely keen to get in touch with counterparts in China. As a result of that, a whole lot of collaboration started.
So our visit to Australia is to learn how our counterparts do their scientific work. It's something, everything is worthwhile to learn from.
Through the 80s, in reaching out to people in China to say, why don't you come and study here? Why don't you come and do research in our universities? The response was very strong and very positive.
The Australia-China Council was set up to expand exchanges with China beyond the official and diplomatic into areas that were more characteristic of community-to-community engagement.
That was the rare opportunity for just few of us to go abroad. And I'm the one who wrote the history of Australian literature, the first of its kind in China. My educational experience in Australia has changed the course of my life.
The Australian Studies Centres were first started at the end of the 80s, and at the very beginning the courses were Australian literature, Australian history, Australian culture and society, and most of them were started by members of the Gang of Nine who studied in Sydney University. The first trip I spent in Australia could be painful in a sense because it challenged a lot of things we were brought up with.
At Melbourne University, there's lots of group discussion to do the team project to stimulate students to acquire and apply the knowledge. The relationship between the student with their supervisor was just unbelievably friendly.
The fact is that the world is becoming more and more globalised, and we have a shared common future, and we can help shape that shared common future by collaborative research.
The reason we chose UTS as one of our strategic partners, not only because we established a joint venture business school 18 years ago, it's also because we both very similar from history, from disciplines, and how we want to run the university, how we want to develop a university.
We now have somewhere in the order of about 60 people between us working in the joint laboratory we established in 2010. The greatest economic and health and well-being issues in China and in Australia is this tsunami of mental and neurological ill health, particularly in the ageing population of dementia. But what we're using for the first time is really the fruit fly to understand behaviour, complicated mechanisms at work in the brain.
We're one of the leaders in the world in dryland agriculture. China has, in the northwest, massive areas of dryland agriculture. Collaboration is going on at a huge rate. Some of the work that we're doing with the Agricultural University in Beijing, Yonggongyu, we've got a project to work in Vietnam, taking the ideas, things we've both developed in looking at the reclamation in the Los area, Sanxi and other areas like that, and applying it in other areas where developmental issues are and reconstitution of natural environments needs to go on.
I decided with a friend of mine to set up an organisation called the Australia-China Youth Association. That's a network that enables young Australians to connect with each other around Australia, and for young Chinese with an interest in Australia to connect with that group, with the idea of developing a body of people who are China savvy and China connected.
The field I'm working in is in water conservation in China. We work with local and provincial governments, and we do this by mobilising mass numbers of students in schools throughout China.
For each Chinese student Australia takes, Australia has one more lifelong friend. Same for China.
The future of Australia-China relations has to be young people. It has to be young people who understand each other's cultures, language, backgrounds, challenges, and therefore the opportunities that it will take to succeed and to bring these two countries closer together.
The joint engagement around common problems, I think, is where the future lies.
When I studied in Australia, I learned some Australian slang, such as "my shout." If I take you out and invite you to have a drink or have a meal, so I will say, "That's my shout."